They deeply affect our subconscious. And yeah, I mean, that's what we used to do, is tell stories by the fire. I'm very connected to that path, and I'm also very much interested in archetypes, and specifically goddess archetypes, and how they sort of awaken those dormant parts in us once we learn the myths, once we know the stories. So stories are super powerful.
Great. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Good to see you again.
Yeah.
And anyone else just want to hop on just for a brief moment and say your name, where you're coming in from, and if there's really something specific that you are looking for out of our class today. And again, today's class is really focused on who are you as a conscious creator? What does it mean to be a conscious creator in our times?
I have a question.
Hi, Grace.
Hi.
Yes.
Hi. In regards to the sanctuary, the beautiful offering sanctuary workshop, I was noticing the discrepancy of the dates. Because it said July 14th in this, and then also July 3rd, and I was wondering if you could clarify.
Oh, there's two things happening. So you're jumping to the end of class, but I'll give you the goods. That's great. Grace, I had the pleasure of getting to hear Grace's beautiful poetry and mystic storytelling in the last class, Speak the Spark. And so on July 3rd, normally I wouldn't talk about this right away, and so I'll just do this briefly, and then we're going to jump straight into class. July 3rd, I have a guest teacher that's coming on as part of a new story series called Sanctuary. And that guest teacher is Brooke Medicine Eagle. And she's going to come do something we've never gotten to do before. She's going to bring us a story from the Lakota Sioux tradition, the story of White Buffalo Woman. And then she's going to bring us into a class on ritual and ceremony. It's an introductory class. I'm doing something I've never done before, which is I am allowing the guest speakers who are just available to the greater community, because now that we are actually getting a nice, big, strong, sturdy community that is speaking this language. Hi, David Scheller. Sorry, I get excited when I see people I know. And so really wanted to continue to feed and nurture this community, even if they aren't in the specific class. And then, of course, there is Sanctuary, which Colette is a part of. And I'll talk more about that at the end. Right now, I really want to commit our time to what you came here for, which was a class that is all about exploring who you are as a conscious creator in our times. So I'm going to dive on in. Just a brief logistics. So I strongly recommend giving yourself the pleasure of watching this in gallery view. You might just want to watch me, and that's fine. But also there's something really beautiful when we're all engaging in something together and we're all bringing our focus and our attention, and we start communicating through our bodies. You know, when we start hearing things and feeling things, we have this communion. And so even though we're not in the same room, we are in the same space. Hey, that's kind of wild and weird. And so I invite you to do that. If your video is on, I just also request that you be still. And if you need to get up and move, that you turn off the video. Reason being, fun evolutionary scientific fact is that our version of humans evolved through peripheral vision, meaning that if the dinosaurs came running at us, we knew to run away. What happens when our peripheral vision gets triggered by moving objects is we go into our reptilian brain and into a state of fight or flight, and our form of critical thinking, problem solving, creativity can actually shut down or be shut off from that fight or flight state of being. So an amazing thing to consider when you're watching moving objects, how your brain is actually activated in a different way, considering if we take in our news and information from television. But look at me, I'm getting ahead of myself. And so I invite you to close your eyes. And as you close your eyes, I invite you to allow yourself to come inward for a few moments. Imagine that, like, all of the energy that you have put out into the world, you know, it's like on the news, on the people that you care about, on the projects that you're working on the things that are grabbing your attention. Imagine yourself calling back all of that energy, all of your energy, calling it all back. Sometimes I like to imagine it coming in through certain color. And maybe there's like a funnel right above your head and it comes right back in. And some of us are more feel and attune things in different ways. So already we have engaged in an activity of perception and seeing. Some of you see this golden light coming straight towards you, and you might even feel the energy come into your body. Some of you might already be start feeling shut down, and you're like, whoa, I'm not seeing anything, I'm not feeling anything. And that shut down, we just allow to breathe into that. And just know that this is about finding your way. This is, how do you see? How do you sense? How do you feel? That's the only right way that there is in this particular activity or exercise or practice. So let's come back to it one more time and just imagining all that energy that we've put out into the world coming back into our being. And as we feel that energy coming into our body, perhaps now that we're bringing our presence into our body, we can start to just attune to, is there a particular part of our body that would like to be nourished by that energy that we've called back? And without making any story, and here we are in this practice of trusting your intuition. Do I need to know why all that energy wanted to go to the lower left part of my stomach? Nope. I just trust that some part of my energy body said, me please. And so I allow my focus and attention to go to that part of my body that asked for attention. And again, this is an exercise, this is a practice of not doubting yourself, of trusting your innermost being that when you ask, it will respond. And so now just taking a couple of nice deep breaths. You might want to pretend like there's a little string at the top of your head that lifts you up, brings more space into your core muscles, gives those organs some space to breathe. And I'm going to invite you into some nice, slow, deep breaths, not big yogic pressure breaths, but that Tai Chi. Can't even hear one sound of air as it's coming in with such effortlessness. As you engage a gentle approach to this giving and receiving way of being. Receiving that gift of breath and then giving back. I'm going to ask you a question in this state of just listening. There's no right or wrong answer, and there might not be any answer. So just allow these answers to gently visit you. The questions gently visit you. What are you in service to? What are you in service to? Whatever comes. Maybe it's love. Maybe it's community. Maybe it's cats. Just what are you in service to? What question won't leave you alone? What keeps tapping at your beingness, bothering you, wanting to answer it? Is there a question that keeps emerging in you? I love to ask this question because all the great TED Talks often begin with, there's a question that wouldn't leave me alone. I had to answer it. So what in your genius is calling to you that's saying, please, please come to me? And what, how aware are you of the internal stories that are in your world that influence how you live in the outer world? Let me repeat that again. How aware are you of your internal stories? The stories that you're made of, the stories that you tell about yourself, the stories that others tell about you to you, and how they influence the roles you play in your outer world. Again, there's no correct or right answer. We're just playing in the land of wonder. I'm going to bring you a quote. We think we tell stories, but stories often tell us. They tell us to love or hate, to see or be seen, and often, too often, stories saddle us and they ride us and they whip us onward and they tell us what to do, and we do it without questioning. The task of learning to be free. I'm going to repeat this again. The task of learning to be free requires learning to hear them, to question them, to pause and hear silence, to name them, and then become a storyteller. That is a quote by Rebecca Solnit. I love this quote more and more and more. I've probably read it a good 200 times. And for those of you who are repeat offenders to these webinars, you've heard it many times. And it's because I hear it just continues to come alive in the times that we're living in more and more ways. So welcome, everyone. If you are just joining, I invite you again to place yourself on gallery view so you can see everybody. One of the things is, like, if you hear something that really resonates, sometimes we can like put a hand on our shoulder and we're having that collective conversation. And if you have questions, I love to have as engaging a conversation as we possibly can. So feel free to pop up your hand or to place your thought and what's coming alive in you in the chat box, and I'll do my best to pick it up. And there are going to be times I'm going to ask questions. They're real questions. And that big question I really invite you to stay with is, is there something inside you that is nagging, that keeps coming back to ask you to tend to it? And it could be that thing. So, an example for me is I kept being obsessed with how people come out of jail with their dignity. I couldn't stop thinking about it. I was like, I just wanted to understand, like, how do people come out of jail with their dignity? So I started talking to anyone I could and reading as much as I could. And I remember I read Nelson Mandela's Long Walk to Freedom. Actually, I listened to it. Much easier to listen to that big, long book. And I started to hear what I was looking for, and a little cut to the chase on that inquiry was Nelson Mandela, while he was put into prison, in all of his writings, never does he ever indicate that he took on the role of becoming a prisoner. He always remained true to who he was as an activist and as someone committed to justice. And every time a new warden would be assigned to the prison that he was moved to or went to, he always set up a meeting with that warden. So he never took on the role. And so as we come into this time in our world, and even with this whole game with masks, the story of, I'm not going to get into the politics of this. I'm just playing with this in the realm of story. So just back off on whatever just came up. I'll take a collective breath together because we all have such reactions. But the story of, I'm not going to wear my mask because you are affecting my freedom, and as a storyteller, my sensibility is like, wow, if a costume, messes with your personal identity and relationship to freedom, we've got a bigger problem, Houston. So just again, as a storyteller, when we look at what's happening in the world, what I love about getting to sit in the position and stand in the role of storyteller is it gives us wild freedom and exceptional liberties to look and examine at what's happening in the world through a million different lenses. And here's our little fun fact. I don't know what it is about you guys. I'm just ahead of myself 500 times. Hello, Kariana and Pearl. I always love getting an Anne Marie. I get to see the familiars, and Deb. Oh, I lost my thought. You see, I got so excited by you that the thought comes and goes. So why don't I go back to the beginning, which is where we should begin, which is how about just a little outline of what we're going to do today. So we're doing a little fast forward introduction to what is the realm of sacred storytelling. Oh, that's what I was going to tell you guys. This really fun fact, speaking of sacred storytelling. So, we're using this metaphor, the chrysalis right now. So many are using this metaphor. Oh my gosh, we're putting the chrysalis. We're going through a massive transformation. What is transformation? Etymology, to change form. So many people are attuning to the butterfly, right? And the butterfly is as a symbol of this time. There's the great dissolve, and then you come out with these big wings. The monarchs are actually blooming all around my house today, so I get to see these guys. They come out and they're all awkward. They have to figure out how to use these wings. I can't even imagine how hard that is, right? Like, they used to walk on land, now they can't even do that anymore. And they come out with new eyes. Check this out. This is science. I read this while learning a children's book the other day. This is what, to my little goddaughter. And it turns out butterflies, it's like flies, actually see the world through 1,000 different perspectives all at once. Don't count me on 1,000, but like hundreds, like many, like they see all these different lenses and all these perspectives of the earth at once. And I was like, this couldn't be more linear in its mythological approach if we tried, because now at this time in the world, we are being, I would say, forced, not even invited, to be shown so many different perspectives of the world happening at once. So I love that. Grab the right metaphors and they will speak to you. Or they'll grab you. So what is a metaphor? It's the language of spirit. That's why we love working with metaphors as storytellers. It's bigger than us. So I'm going to introduce you to the landscape of storytelling as a sacred art form. I can tell that there's something in your wily bunch that's going to make me go fantastically off script. So that's already built in, apparently. We're going to talk a little bit about working with story as a tool for transformation. Obviously, we're here to wonder about what does it mean to be a conscious creator in our times. I'm going to give you a couple of super fast skill building exercises. So you won't get to do all of them in our time together, but you'll get to record them and consider them. And one of my most beloved teachers, Stephen Jenkinson, uses this expression: I'm going to shoot many arrows out into our crowd today, and some of them will land and some of them won't. And if they don't, it's okay. They weren't meant for you, but something else hopefully will. So that's why I love, giving you a moment to set the intention. What do you need from our time today? So you can put your super spidey ears out, and so that when it flies by, you will hear it. We're going to play with what is your apocalyptic archetype, and that will be the bulk of our masterclass today. And then after that, I'm going to talk a little bit about what is sanctuary, which Grace hinted to, which is a new course, and I'll spend a few moments talking about that. And then I'm going to do something I've never done before on one of these classes, and I'm going to share a story. And it's a brand new story that just came through the other morning at 4 a.m., as they will. And it's a Earth story about what she has to say about Corona. So I'm going to give you a very brief background of me. I grew up moving between Vermont, Virginia, and New York City. It gave me a lot of wild range between what it was to live in the rural country and play in the rivers and listen. And then I also grew up in Soho in the art scene because my mother was a painter. And I moved so much. And if any of you have moved a lot as a child, you know that it is a unique situation that does not always include a ton of friends. And books really were my companions during that time, and stories. And I would say that the companionship and the ability to escape the reality that I was in, while also traveling to far off worlds and learning things that those around me couldn't teach me. And so my world was expanded, and it was also protected through the realm of story. I learned the responsibility of storytelling and the power of story as a healing tool for transformation when I went through one of my very first massive losses as a human, which was when my best friend committed suicide when I was in high school. And because I had story and because I had writing and because I was very lucky and I had parents who had seen that little genius talent in me emerging and had put me into theater classes and writing classes, I had a way to metabolize and process my grief. And I went to that place that had always been my escape from the world. And all of a sudden, that escape from the world gave me a way to heal the world that I was living in. And I ended up writing this play, and that play went to go on to be produced at a playwriting festival. And that's where I learned the responsibility of storytelling. That what we put out will come back to us. And while I was managing my own relationship to grief, I was then also responsible to manage and be present with the grief of those that came alive after hearing that story. I went on to, work as a wilderness guide. I went on to study environmental justice. I worked in theater in New York City and worked off Broadway, and soon learned that that was not going to be for me. And I eventually made my way to San Francisco, and I was working with Al Gore on a couple of his pet projects around getting people to speak out around politics, and ended up producing the Green Channel. And what I discovered was, while we were there at the height of talking about climate change, that I had this little ingredient, this recipe that I went by. And that was, if I give people the information they need to get them to inspiration, that will get them to motivation, then to activation. And when we looked at all the data, I learned that I was actually asking the wrong question. It's not what information people needed. It wasn't even what they wanted. Turns out people can't even metabolize information. We are not computers. We are humans. We are made of story. And what people were most yearning for was story. And when I saw that, all of a sudden, it gave me the permission that I needed to return to the truth of what I was, which was a storyteller. And so as I was finding my place and how to be of service in these times, it turns out that it's in the thing that brings me the most pleasure, story. So let's go back. Let's go back and let's visit with that ancient wisdom that is alive in our world, which comes from some of the most ancient cultures. The Hawaiians believe that words are so powerful that they can raise enough energy to slow the world or to set it into motion. If you have not had an opportunity to watch Hawaiians who have kept their indigenous practices alive, and the hula dance, which is a prayer embodied through sound and motion, go to YouTube and find that, because you will get to see and experience yourself. And I love this expression in terms of that storytellers have so much power that they can change our relationship to time. Einstein tells us that too. That it's a relative thing, and time is in the mouth of the beholder. Sicilians say that words are so powerful that they can poke holes in the universe. Think about the last time you said something when you were a little heated and you couldn't take it back. The Australians say that the stories of the past must be sung to our present so that the future can exist. I love this. I also feel like Martin Luther King Jr. gave us that exact way of being when he said, "I will not refuse or deny the past from which we come." Right? I will bring that into our present while making a vision for the future. It's a very, when we look at wanting to make change in the world, that recipe of claiming the past, speaking it into the future, creating a vision that people can go towards, there's a loop there. It's actually more than a loop. There's he makes a bridge for us. And then the Maori say that the words they don't describe the things, they are the things. And all the ancient religions agree that the world was sung, spoken, and chanted into existence. I'm going to say that again because it's really mind-blowing when you consider how much power and influence you have on the world around you, as we understand that this is some of the oldest knowledge from all the cultures around our planet, agree that the world was sung, spoken, and chanted into existence. Abracadabra. It's one of the oldest words on our planet. It comes from the Aramaic mysticism, and it means I create as I speak. So I'm going to ask you to wonder something with me. I'm going to ask you to do something that I've never had to ask you to do before, because I had to move locations very last minute. And I need to plug in my phone because it's where the sound is coming from. And it just so happens that there are enough of us in the room who I know really can start engaging in a lively conversation. Can I ask you who are here I'm going to ask all of you to say, the question is, what is a story? What is a story? And I'm going to invite you as a collective to share while I'm so sorry, grab my cell phone charger so that I can continue to be with you. So do I have agreement with those of you who I know are my ringers? And for those of you who this is their first time, just know that this is an opportunity to practice eloquence. You don't have to know the answer. The answer is already living inside you. It's a matter of taking that nice deep breath, grounding yourself to the earth, opening to that creative flow, speaking with generosity, meaning not going too long, just getting to the essential of what wants to come through you. That wisdom, that gift to us. I don't want to miss these gifts. I can't miss these gifts. Hold on. I'm going to give you something else to do, because I want to give you something to do so that I get to hear all this, because this is my favorite part. I can't miss the goods. Here's what I'm going to ask you to do. I want to invite you, we're going to skip ahead a little bit, but this way you can have a few moments just to consider. We're going to talk about your apocalyptic archetype. Okay. This is a skill building exercise. And apocalypse, what is the apocalypse? The etymology of the word is, the etymology of apocalypse, it's a lifting of the veils. It's a Greek word. And so when we look at that word, if we understand that apocalypse is a lifting of the veils, and we can actually see what's here, right? It's that moment in The Wizard of Oz when they pull back the curtain, right? It's the moment in our society when all of a sudden we're like, oh, racism, wow, we can't run from it anymore. Oh, economic injustice, oh, we can't run from that one anymore. It's like, it's all in our face. We're getting to see everything. So I would say that perhaps the word apocalypse has been actually hijacked from us to mean the end of the world, when really, if we are students of etymology and understand that words will actually give us the codes to understanding the world around us, then when we understand apocalypse, we're like, oh, it just means the end of the world as we know it. Because now the veils are lifted, the curtain's been pulled aside, we can actually see the truth of everything of what's there, including ourselves. Okay, so the game that we get to play with is the game that we're playing is, what is your apocalyptic archetype? That part of you that comes alive when the curtain is pulled back. And so I'm putting in the chat room, so when you think about what is that apocalyptic archetype, an archetype is a universal structure. So there's the goddess of love, there's the wise woman, there's the priest, there's the priestess, there's the sorcerer, right? We understand that these are all archetypes. They all live inside of us, and that some are more activated than others, depending on who we are and what we're doing and what is allowed from us in the world that we're living in, right? And so I'm asking you to go into that essence part of yourself, that part that's coming alive, and start to play with it. You might be a bridge builder. You might be bridging builds between worlds. You might be a mirror. You just have to show people the truth. Keep looking, keep looking, keep looking. You might be a way shower, and you're the one that's got the bright light. You might be a metabolizer, that person that is able to be so present to really feel the grief, and you're metabolizing that grief in our world. So I'm going to invite you to break through the ideas of what we know as known roles and ways, acceptable ways of being, and come into the truth of what are you. You just might be a love button. And every time you go out, you're just sharing love. It doesn't matter if you're in the post office or the paint store. You're smiling and you're just sharing. You're that Care Bear, So, so there's some in the chat box. There are a couple of questions that you can ask yourself about your apocalyptic archetype. I will be right back and see you in just a moment.
Hello, I'm Grace, and I will share something in terms of the archetype. The archetype that I've been playing with during this time is a bridge builder between dreams and reality. I have a lucid dreaming practice that I've had for 25 years. And I share some of the messages that come through there for this time. And so in that way, I see myself as a bridge.
I'll dovetail after that. I'm also a bridge builder. Definitely have strong connection to spirit, whatever it is for everyone. I have my own, but I do it non-denominationally with everyone, and being that bridge to the earth as well. That connection to from spirit and earth, and bringing that connection to others in a variety of ways.
Hi, my name is Carolyn. I too am a bridge builder, and I have a congregation of people that I speak to every week. And it's amazing during this time of COVID, it's grown because we're virtual. So there are people that I'm bridging with the stories of our history, our ancestral history, reminding them of we've been through this before and we will come out on the other side because we've come out on the other side before, and assisting in standing in that place of ease. And this is what is now, but knowing that we will come out on the other side. So thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. If you feel inclined to give your apocalyptic archetype a fancy, fun, playful name, it can bring joy to the experience. So whoever else we can play at that, we can play at it with you too.
Hi, I'm Sandy Cohn, and my apocalyptic archetype is a light warrior. And I would say about 2 months ago, I looked into my name that my parents named me, and they were certainly not in touch with what names meant when they did that. And my name actually meant light warrior. So that was a big surprise. I really kinesthetically and otherwise feel light. And the imagery that I have is connecting the Indra's net, all those points that started to dim. And although I'm not a dancer, I consistently see myself spinning and dancing light to connect our smaller stories to the really big story of who we truly are. That's my.
And so we can play with you too, right? Because I love when we have these moments when, it's all connected, right? Your parents didn't know the name, but they somehow landed on the essence of what's in your spirit, and light warrior, and I would say web weaver, because you're talking about connecting the dots, and what is the web weaver? Is the archetype of the storyteller. We're multidimensional. We're being very multidimensional today because who needs to talk about what a story is? We'll just start playing roles, you know, so we're not going in a linear order, but stories aren't linear. You know, you don't have to be linear to live in a big story. Let's do two more. Two more people want to be essential in their description of what they are. And I'm going to ask you to be brief with us so that we can do that. I see Kathleen and Pearl. And did I see Anna's hand go up? Or are you just, no? Okay, no. Okay. Kathleen. I think you have to take yourself.
My name is Kathleen. Am I on?
You are.
Okay, my name is Kathleen, and this is the first time I've ever responded to something like this, so I'm quite excited. And I see myself as a window. And I studied art, so I draw, I paint, and I try to do different creative things. And especially during COVID-19, I did a series of sketches and paintings of nature. I went out and actually sketched every day, and I shared them on different Facebook choices, and people actually said that they looked forward to it and it cheered them up. So I see myself as a window, but I see myself as a window in a series of windows, and you can choose which window you look through.
Mm-hmm.
So I try to be the sharing, positive beauty window.
I would, if I could play with you, might say, a window joy bringer, you know, a joy bringer to the window, you know, a window to the joy, you know, in terms of, it sounds like you also really bring a certain feeling with what you're giving people access to. We're going to go down to Pearl, and then we're going to move on to our next way of play today.
First of all, wow. You are a wonderful group of people. Just fantastic. I'm blessed. Okay, I was going to say that I'm a magician of many hats. However, as everyone was talking, I saw a wheel. I saw the center. I saw the spokes. So I am going to say that I am a weaver of tales. And I like the word weaving. I know that when women talk, you can interrupt each other and you can go in and out and weave in and out. With men, usually, excuse me for the generalization, it can be a little more difficult. So I believe that all conversation is a weaving.
Yeah. Thank you. And what I appreciate in terms of what you were just speaking to was like, how do we be with all of it? You know, how do we be with the all? And I feel like that's one of the unique things that storytellers get to do. We don't have to make something right or wrong. We don't have to make something bad or good. You know, we can live in the bigger truth that it's all of it that makes the wholeness of the story. And it's like, if there's anything that I feel devoted to as a storyteller, it's in wholeness and all the expressions of that. So let's come back to that question, which is what is a story? What is a story? And you can just popcorn, like, you know, just a phrase. You can put it in the chat box. You can put it here. My cat is in a big story that he really wants me to give him snacks. So if you're hearing a lot in the background, that is Theo. He knows that he has me in a unique position when I'm teaching. Very clever about this. Yes, he does have a lot to say. A lot. The story is an exploration of a path, says, I hope I'm pronouncing your name right, Stacy. Right, so it's a journey. You go somewhere. There's something that happens. A story is a blooming. That's beautiful. There's something that happens. Oops, sorry. Sorry, who was just talking? A story can be a coping mechanism. Okay. Story can be the life that we live it. It can be a form of healing. It's got a wisdom and a moral about life or something, right? So there's different kinds of stories. We have wisdom stories, which they give us an opportunity to harvest our life experiences. They're my favorite stories, wisdom stories. You take this time in your life that was just horrific and hard, and wow, what a bummer. And then you go in there because you're a storyteller. And if you're a storyteller, you know that everything that happens in life is just going to give you material for the next great story, right? And so even when you're in it, even when you're in the muck of it, you're just taking notes about how horrible it is and all the different feelings, because eventually you know that you're going to cultivate it, that is going to become compost, and you're going to harvest what happened, and that you're going to be different on the side of it. You're not going to be the same person that was living that story when you're on the side of it, the person that can tell that story, and you're going to guide people through that journey, and so that's one of the beautiful things about what's a wisdom story is it's like a gift that you can give. You're not going to just re-traumatize everyone through the story, telling them about your trauma. Very different experience. We do a whole class on that. The story is creation of an image and to express an emotion. And one of the things, we have a professional actor among us. I happen to know at least one, David Schiller. And one of the things about acting, and one of the things that stories can do is, and one of the reasons why it's so much fun to go to the theater or go see a movie, is that we get to access emotions that perhaps we can't access on our own. And that's one of the things that we can do as storytellers, is we can give people access to those things. So perhaps you can't touch your own grief because it's too hard, or you don't want to do it by yourself, or perhaps you can't touch that rage, or perhaps you can't even touch the joy or the happiness, but you can go to a happy movie, or you can watch a romance, or you can go, watch Hamlet, and you can all of a sudden get access to all these different feelings that you don't normally get to have just on your own. And it's a way that we can support each other. It's a kind of a wild thing that happens. Also, I can't get into the brain science right now, but our brains are very easily tricked when we're watching stories. And so when you watch a horror film, it doesn't know that it's not being harmed. You actually have the same chemicals that are going off in your brain. Same things with love. So when you go watch a romance, it's really fun because all the serotonin, the dopamine is just going off. It's a total party because your brain thinks it's in love. It's such an amazing thing that we do with each other. Kathleen says a story is a choice of how we interpret a situation, right? It's a perspective, and there's a framing. For those of you who read my email today, I could have said go to your spam folder because Gmail sucks, and often sends the emails to that. No, well, let's frame it into a great story. Go to your spam folder because the gods of technology are going to send you on a journey, into a form of initiation to test your commitment to how much you want to be here. So go to your spam folder. It's how do you frame the story? How do you frame the experience for the young people around you about what's going on in the world? Do you cast a story of fear and terror? Or are you able to look at the world and what better, if you ever want an extraordinary structure of story to study, there's a movie called Life is Beautiful. And it's the most beautiful, fun, delightful, heartwarming story about the Holocaust. And it's all about framing. How do you frame an experience while living in the truth, but being able to claim multiple truths happening at once? And it's a container, a hold of a message, often one of great meaning, says Maxine. And so, I love that. And more, I think of story as a sanctuary or as a temple. The story is a temple. And it's a place where people can go to come into relationship with that creative life force. What do we call that creative life force? I think many of us have different names for it. Some might call it the muse. Some might call it the ancestors. Some might call it the earth speaking out loud. Some might call it God. I'm just going to call it that creative life force. And when you go into the world of the story, when your listener can truly come into the story and rest in that temple, in that sanctuary, they can see parts of themselves that maybe they didn't have the courage or the ability or the tools to see before they were in this place. And why more and more I think of story as a temple, as a sanctuary, is because it's a place where you can look at those parts of yourself without being judged. No one's going to see what you're looking at. And so as a storyteller, you're a keeper of the temple. You have the keys. So it's a it's a sacred role in my perspective. David's saying a story is a way to be in another's body. Whoops, there's another big thing that came in. Body's mind and experience. Right. So you get to experience someone else's perspective through story. So these are all beautiful ways of expressing story. I'm now going to go into an extremely unpoetic version. And since humans often refer to themselves in the latest technology, I'm going to follow that train and speak to story as in the form of technology. It's an operating system. And in that operating system, we are taught our belief systems, our values, and what we believe is possible. So think about the stories that you were raised with as a child. Think about the stories that you're told about our country. Think about the stories that we're being told about the particular situation that we're in. Think about the fairy tales. And think about how they affected your view of the world and what you believed your role was supposed to be in the world. So if we play with that, now let's play into what is a sacred story. Oh, Grace is typing. What is a sacred story? You see that Anna Marie put a very long comment there, and I'm going to let people read on. Okay. No one's falling for my trap today. Kariana says a story that emerges naturally from one's heart, soul, core, and not the mind. Beautiful. So it's right. It's not coming from the ego. It's coming from somewhere else. Sandy's saying it put us in touch with the divine and beyond, right? That what is that divine? We'll speak a little bit more about that. And it vibrates through my body. I know it was meant for me. Okay, so now we're talking about resonance. So it's a story that has a resonance. So the thing about calling anything sacred is that it's a setup. And the reason why it's a setup is because the moment we use that language, we inherently say that something else is not sacred. Right? It's a weird thing. Well, what does sacred mean? It says, I see the life force in you. I honor and respect the life in you. I see this as sacred. So one mountain is sacred, but the mountain next to it isn't, just because of how we see it. It gets confusing really fast. So, but like going back to this idea of saying when we evoke that language of sacred, we're saying that we see the divine in you. We see that divine life force in you. Now we're saying, okay, now what is a sacred story? Oh, it has the presence of the divine in it. So it's not me telling you a teaching story because I want you to do exactly what I want you to do, right? Or make my point. The sacred story, as I understand this and how I have learned how to approach a sacred story, it's a very humble process. It's one of collaboration. It's one where I am in collaboration with that life force, where I'm following that creative life force. I don't know, I've never told anyone this story, but it's emerging in your presence. And I once, I used to be, I was sitting with Paul Hawken one day, and I was telling him about this big story that came through. And I was doing this thing of being humble. There's a fine line between humble and false humble, right? And I was just like, well, I just received the story. It's just coming through me. And he was like, whatever. He's like, I'm the one that sits down and gets my butt in the chair and the discipline to write and finish the book, and that is his like strong formed ego, and I think that there is a true collaboration. Yes, the spirit comes to many people and will come through them and will speak to them, but not everyone is willing to wake up at 4 a.m. and to listen to the story. Not everyone is willing to put their pen to the paper and capture the story or the thing that's coming through. And not everyone wants to or chooses to share what they heard and received. The storyteller that works with sacred storytelling is that wild weaver in collaboration that has that trust and that relationship with the divine, that discipline to write it down and capture it, and then to craft it in such a way so that it can be shared. So there we go. I've never shared that in a webinar before. Thank you for calling it forth. So when we look at a sacred story, what we're doing is we're saying, okay, this story that's unique is because it has a life force that's here to serve life. So I can tell a really hard story about the Holocaust. I can shine the light on racism, but that there's going to be something in that story that has beauty, Like, in what is beauty, but it feeds the soul. So there's going to be something in it that is nurturing, that feeds people so that they can receive the depth and those universal truths that are here to serve life. They're in the story that you're giving. Okay, normally I talk about zombie stories, but we're going to skip that today because we're going to go straight to our last little fun activity. And this is one of my favorite things. And I think this is one of the best skill building things. This is called flipping the story and getting roles to change. Okay, so let's say that you are in a story and there is a bad guy, like really a bad guy. That bad guy might be cancer. It might be a human. It might be a ravenous dog. It might be something, and you might want to, you could take a fairy tale and do this, or you can actually take a circumstance in your life and you can think of, it's that neighbor that just won't leave you alone. He's just got something really wrong. It's always something. Okay, so you got your bad guy, right? Okay, now we're gonna do a flip switch. Okay, here you go. Changing, we're stealing the story. We're gonna flip it upside down and we're gonna recast the bad guy into the role of the master teacher. Okay. Oh my gosh, this person, this being has come to serve you, is here in service of you. Flipping the story. They are offering you an opportunity to strengthen parts of yourselves that you have not been willing or given the opportunity to engage yet. Colette, thank you for laughing with me. So perhaps you have to grow a backbone. Perhaps you need to learn how to be vulnerable. Perhaps they are showing you something that you have not been willing to look at about yourself, and you are forced to address your own shadow when you stop making them the bad guy and so wrong. It doesn't mean that cruel things still haven't happened. This doesn't mean that an injustice has not been done. But what this does do is gives you an immediate way to change the role that you are playing, and an immediate way to change your script and your dialogue, and gives you, I know it's so simple, right? It's so simple. And it gives you a way to see the divine in them. And what happens when you change the rule of how you relate to them? Your lived experience changes. Doesn't mean they don't still bother you. But all of a sudden when you say, oh, okay, how about my higher self meets your higher self, and I'm going to recast myself as being, the devotee of learning my life lesson, so that I don't have to do it again, and honoring what this is, what's being given to me as a gift. I just heard, I think Vayana, who's in the class from Sanctuary right now, just told me this great story. She was at the farmer's market. This man came to her and he said, there's only two things that happen in the world: great things and really great things. And she said, really? And she's like, yeah, great things are the things that you want to have happen. Really great things are the things that the universe orchestrated for you to have happen for you that you didn't even know that you wanted. Again, it's like framing. It doesn't mean that we don't have grief. These aren't ways to, and to, what's the word, spiritually, it's a super shadow, to like escape the pains of being human. This isn't about not being present to grief. This isn't about denying your anger or rage about something that isn't that isn't respectful or honoring. But this is about giving you a way to find your own life force power in that moment. Right, thank you. Spiritual bypass. We're not doing that here. Okay, so any questions, anything that's come alive in our time together? Or what I'm even going to ask you to do right now is, we're coming towards the end of our time together. And what I love to do is give people a moment to anchor in what you are taking away from what we've done so far. What do you want to anchor in? What do you want to take away? It might be some of you that didn't get to tell your apocalyptic archetypes might want to type it in or speak to it. Or if there's just something that surfaced that you just want to anchor and be like, yep, I'm going to take that away. You can speak it out loud, or you can place it in the chat. And then after that, I'm going to talk to you a little bit about Sanctuary for those who want to hear about what that class is. And then after that, I'm going to read a little story. Yes, Christine.
Thank you. Yeah, actually, you already inspired me before I woke up this morning, Leah, and I'm so glad you did this class.
Yeah.
And then a reminder, because I had a very muse moment this morning. Real big idea, like share this idea of like creating a love moment for everyone in the world to share, like we do for the first responders.
Mm-hmm.
And I was like, that's kind of crazy. But then I thought all those kids took over TikTok. And I was like, all you got to do is create something and give it to the kids. And in 15 days,
Mm-hmm.
a global moment where we can get together and sing and dance and hold each other in love. And I was like, if that's not a crazy muse, like inspiration, like I don't know what is. But I was spending 20 minutes calling like the couple people I know who have thousands of followers and like, if I created this, would you do it? And they're like, hell yeah. Like I will go to my people and I will say it online, live and draw, paint, sing, dance, and just bask in love. And I feel like this moment you helped me see like I'm the waypointer. I don't have any followers, but I have people who have followers.
Well, and I would call you an igniter. This is one of my favorite archetypes to play, actually, is when you see someone who can do something and you just light the match underneath them and then you walk away. You're not starting wildfires, but you're like, here, well, I'm just going to spark you and your idea. So thank you. Thanks for listening.
Well, let's see it in 15 days, okay? Like if you
tell me and I'll feature it. So keep me in the loop. Okay. Helen's saying, I'm willing to capture the story because I love the moment of the story, but it is overwhelming to slow it down to the physical level. Thank you. And Minnie is saying, my takeaway is the flip switch. Yes. April's saying, love flipping the story idea. Sandy's saying it makes it you see from a different perspective. And Anna's saying, today in my 52nd birthday, happy birthday! When we all give a little sunshine. Anna, are you gonna tell us who you are so we can give you a little sunshine? I'm gonna take a vow of celibacy and I'm done for now with intimate relationships. Okay. All right, so sending you some love on your new story. Yes. Okay. Anyone else just want to anchor in something that you're claiming? Kathleen's saying, thank you. Thank you for that. I really appreciate that. All right. If no one else feels inclined to speak, I'm going to give you a final quote because it's sort of like bowing to your Tai Chi teacher. We bow to those who have come before us by honoring the words of those who are walking this great path of commitment to word and story and showing up in the times that we have to give. So here's your final quote. Act as if you are people of consequence so that I can treat you as such and that you matter. What must have happened to people who unconsciously agreed that the best presence in this world is to have no consequence in this world? I'm gonna read that again because it's like, whoa. What must have happened to people who unconsciously agreed that the best presence in this world is to have no consequence in this world? It is a velvet gauntlet, this idea of being of consequence. It doesn't clink when it hits the ground, but you can feel it. It would be proper to proceed that there is consequence to us being here. That was by Stephen Jenkinson, a mighty fine elder who's speaking about what it means to be an elder in our times. And I strongly recommend, if you're needing to hear some wisdom words, like Carolyn was speaking. Carolyn, you're a wisdom keeper. Thank you for bringing that to us. He's another voice in that realm. All right, so that's our class for today. Thank you to everyone who came for that. And now for those of you who want to hear about Sanctuary, I'm just going to speak for a few moments about what this wild new class is. And this class came to me truly birthed out of the time of COVID in terms of what's needed for these times. So I'm going to put a little link on here, and for those of you who want to go look at it, you can. It's a beautiful class. And so basically, I've been teaching online, doing sacred storytelling for quite some time. And Stephen Jenkinson, Bruce, that's the person who has that quote. And here, you know what? I'm even going to go back and I'm going to give it to you because that is the kind of day this is. Here you go. I'm going to put that in the chat box for those of you who would like it. So I've been teaching sacred storytelling for quite some time online and have been really in this place of reintroducing people to storytelling as a sacred art form. It's not something that a lot of us have no story as in our time. It's been used for us, it's been used against us, and it's been used in all different kinds of ways. Let us even track that language of use. When you go back and follow the etymology of use, if you really follow it back, it comes to the word slavery. Okay, so whoa, what are we saying that we're enslaving a story for our use? Well, you're going to get the most out of it. I don't think so. So what is it to come into a relationship with a sacred story, to be humble and honor and respecting that wisdom that's beyond you, that wants to come through our times through the stories that you tell, and step onto that, work with story as a form of eldership, where you know that you have a gift to give and something to give to our times, and you're in that giving nature. So I've been teaching these introductory classes and bringing on extraordinary guest teachers because, you know, I'm one of those people that is committed to really continuously keeping a place where our elders have a place to have their voices amplified, where those of us that really need that elder wisdom and hungry for it can receive it. And after many years of doing this, really got to that while we were doing a lot of introduction to a lot of the big concepts and the philosophy and the theory and the actions, we weren't able to get deep enough. And I don't know about you, but in this time of COVID, wow, what an opportunity to go deep. And I really got, it's time to go deeper in this work. And it's time to create more space. And also it's time to give people, in strange times, rather than sign up for a 9-month course, let's get people really focused on the specific part that they really want, that really will receive them. So I created smaller modules for this longer course. So Sanctuary is the introductory course in the first module to this new program, which is called the Autumn Cara School for Sacred Arts. And the program itself goes through all chakras of the body. And Sanctuary is that first chakra. And what it does is it focuses on who you are as a creator. So whether or not you're into storytelling or not, or writing or not, Sanctuary is really committed to all people who see themselves as creators. And I would say that all humans are creators of one thing or another. And it supports us in becoming conscious creators. And what it does is it is a really out-of-the-box wild class where that really engages the technology. Look up the etymology of that because it's a truly true use of that word in this, the technology of prayer, ritual, and ceremony as you step into fully activating your creator matrix. So what does that look like is that what I understand through the process of doing that, and one of the students from Speak the Spark, a couple of students started calling to me and they said, I told them about this process of creating psychic silence when I create. And I asked, I was like, does anyone want like the guidebook on psychic silence? And I didn't know if anyone would be interested. And all it takes is like more than 3 people to say yes, right? And so more than 3 people emailed me back and they said, yes, we want the guide to create psychic silence. So psychic silence is something that I've been creating over about a decade. And it's a process that I didn't even know I was creating, which is when I would go in to work on this really big book. And it was a book that I really created through the deepest kind of listening. And so that when I needed that deep kind of listening, I actually needed a silence that was separate from the world that I lived in. And I also just instinctively knew that I needed to get away from matter. I didn't even know why, But what I'll tell you now is that matter takes up energy. And matter, the things around us, we're all looking in each other's rooms and homes, like all these things take up energy and all these things hold stories. and belief systems, and they reflect our values, and they hold a certain energy that we are then creating in. And if we're not completely aware of that energy, then it's going to affect what we create or don't create. So as I sat down at the beginning of COVID to create the guidebook to how to create psychic silence, I realized that I had needed to create it in my home. I couldn't escape. I couldn't go to the little house at the edge of the ocean to write. And so I needed to create the psychic silence in my home. And I started in my bedroom, and I pulled everything apart. And as I started to pull everything apart in the process of doing that, the book literally came through, and this entire curriculum for this class. And I started to get, oh, this isn't just for me. This is something to be shared. This step-by-step, very specific process of being able to catch all the different stories that are living in our space. So here's a room. I'm actually in my housemate's room because technology will not work in my office today. But like, as I started to do this, oh, what roles am I playing unconsciously? What are the scripts that I'm not aware of? They're living in my space that have inhabited my dreaming space. And as I started to recreate this space, and what I really realized is that I was creating a sanctuary that I could create within, which is ironic because I don't write in my book, in my bedroom. But here was the thing that I realized, that why do we start in our bedroom is because it's the place where we're dreaming. And so we want that place to be so protected and so clear and so consciously tended. So this class actually takes place in your bedroom, and it invites you into this process of recreating your space into a sacred space. And it gives you all the practices that includes ritual, that includes ceremony, that includes prayer, as you identify and find all these different energies that are living in your psychic space. And then we give you the material to compost and transform your relationship to them through story as we go. And what I understand about this process is that, one of the oldest, understandings and wisdom keepings is as above, so below, as within, so without. And as you recreate your physical space, you will see and not be able to hide from all of your strengths as a creator and all of your challenges. So your creator archetype is going to reveal right before your very eyes. And you're going to see where you, excuse my language, kick ass as a creator, where your total strengths are, and you're also going to see the parts that you really need assistance. Maybe you can start a project like nobody's business. Maybe you can't finish it. Or maybe you're that person that needs like 4 people at your side to help you create the structure to begin so you can launch. But once you're in there, you go. Or perhaps you're a builder and you're that person that's like right in between. So you're gonna understand that, so that then when you come out, you will know exactly what you need to thrive. And so my goal, the thing that I love to do is I love to play with creators who can gallop, And so this is what I think of. It's like we're preparing ourselves to be able to gallop. And when you're galloping, when you see those barriers in the way, they're playthings. You just soar over them. Doesn't mean that you don't ignore the barriers, the blocks, right? Because if you ignore them, you're going to hit right into them. But if you're getting a good gallop and you've got that momentum, you can start playing with them. So that's the kind of fun metaphor that we're doing. It's a 6-week class. We begin on July 14th. And I've also brought in, so we meet 6 times. We meet on Tuesdays at 10 a.m. To 12 p.m. Pacific Standard Time. And then there's a couple of other things that are there. There are 5 master guest teachers. And as we step into this relationship with ritual and ceremony, it was really important for me, again, to bring in the elder keepers, the people who kept these traditions alive. And so our first guest speaker will be this Friday, Brooke Medicine Eagle. And she will be actually telling us a story of White Buffalo Woman, which is a story from the Lakota Sioux. Really speaks to how to live in these times. And then she's also going to do an introductory class on ritual and ceremony. And we're going to be integrating some of those rituals and ceremonies into our class. We also have Alika Atai, who is an indigenous farmer from Hawaii. And you're like, wait, we're doing a class on creativity. Why is a farmer coming into this class? And here's, again, it's as within, so without. To how do we fully embody the metaphor? So as storytellers, we are seed planters. We are always planting seeds. So to understand the true practice of what does it mean to prepare yourself to plant seeds, what does it truly mean to be a gardener, we get to really imbibe in that, and also learn indigenous practices of gardening. And yes, we are literally planting seeds as part of the rituals in this class. And we're also going to have Elaine Dougherty, who runs another mystery school called Priestess Presence, and she's going to lead us up in a class on how do you prepare a sacred space and how do you prepare the temple within. And again, as I speak to before, if story is the temple, and you as a storyteller are the temple keeper, how do you prepare yourself? So we bring Diana Dubrow in, who is a scent priestess, and one of the few people that's carrying some of the ancient knowledge on anointing. And so she's going to give us a class on anointing. And then last but not least is Kristen Meyer, who's going to bring us into a visionary drawing class and will lead us through a practice of creating a sacred symbol for your space. So that is Sanctuary. You might just say, I just want the guest teachers. I can't actually do that class right now. And the guest speaker series, you can actually just register for one class or the entire series. And this is the first time I've ever done this before. Usually the guest speakers were only available to those who registered for the class. But it just feels like, game on, it feels like in our times right now. And I really wanted people who know that they want to be held through this process to be held as they launch into this year-long program. And for those who really just want to glean from the unique pieces that these teachers have to offer, to have access to that. You also get a small group that you work with outside of class. And that's your team of greatness. And they're there to look and find and support your greatness and to really hold you through and help you be accountable so that you finish and really thrive in the group setting, along with the Facebook group and all that kind of good stuff. Thank you, Sapphire. I think it's going to be really, really fun. And there's some beautiful people that have gathered, and it's already started. So the other thing that comes with it, and I'm not in my office, otherwise I would have shown it to you, but we have this beautiful ritual kit that was created just for us, just for our class, that was lovingly put together. Every single herb was hand-picked, and the candles were hand-dipped, and it's really something. It's a true work of art that Brittany has created for us. And so all of these rituals will be built in the class. If you want to get the ritual kit along with it, then that is there for you. But by all means, it's like you can also gather all the materials on your own. So it's all there. Curious about your year-long class, says Colette. Okay, so I haven't actually launched the page yet, but I'll tell you a little bit about it. I'll even give the goods and tell you that so much of this came through dreams. I have this very inspired expression, and I really heard it's time to change the shape and form of your school. And what ended up happening was the Autumn Carter School for Sacred Arts. And it's actually based on the principles of a starfish, the principles of a starfish, and meaning that has regeneration codes of starfish. So basically, it's set up to have 6-week modules and 4-week modules that team up together. So for example, the Sanctuary is that first 6-week module. We go in to explore where our stories are, what wants to be composted, what wants to be shed, what wants to be polished, what wants to be harvested. And it's this massive discovery process, right? So that's the in. Then we come out. It's just like the ocean, right? It's just the in and the out. And we come out, to give our gifts through a 4-week story class called Mythos. And that is completely committed to you just telling one story that is your creation myth. So, before when we would do the big classes, we would just, each class, each month I would introduce a new story structure, but that was it. You were kind of on your own to go really, complete it. In this class, we will work together through 4 classes in 1 month, where you will get to work that story. You'll get to have it workshopped. You'll get to have a little bit of story coaching, so that you can practice it, and then you'll get to deliver it. So at the end of that class, you will have the opportunity to feel rock solid in your full telling of a new story about yourself, about your personal mythos. So we're working in the mythic dimension. We're working with creation myths. The second module of the course will go through the second chakra, and it's called Unity. and it's all about relationships, sexuality, intimacy. And we're going to dive into those stories, and we're going to find what wants to be composted and what wants to be worked with, and what wants to be cleared and what wants to be surfaced. We're going to come out with our teaching stories. You know, I often think about the Me Too movement and hearing so many of the same stories over and over and over again. If we'd only lived in a culture where more women told their stories, then perhaps those behind us wouldn't have to repeat them because they would have heard them. So it's an opportunity for us to tell all the different kinds of stories that live in that place, not just the Me Too stories, all the different kinds of stories. Then we're going to go into the core, and that is Eros. This is your life force power. You know, this is your life work, your purpose. So we're going to go inwards and go into the stories, into the areas that are messing with that. And we're going to come out with our wisdom stories, our threshold stories. And we're going to go into the heart. You're getting it, right? This goes back and forth. And so with each group, each time we go into those 6-week modules, we will have guest teachers that focus and are experts on that specific content. So for Unity, we'll have some relationship teachers and stuff like that. So is that enough to kind of give you an idea, a little scope? If you want more information, I can give you the behind the scenes information. It should be coming live probably in about 3 weeks. It takes time to get this stuff out. Learning how to be patient. Yay, Sapphire. Okay. And then what I will say, since I'm just here, is that on the other side of it, there's also, there's an advanced group called the Artemis Group. And this is a group of people that really want to take on the role of facilitators and working with story as a tool for transformation and change. And so that will be a very small group, probably of about 8 people. And so that information will be coming up soon too. Okay, so you want a story? I'm gonna give you a story. I've never done this before in these classes. This story comes from the dream space. And it's a news story. It came through at 4 a.m. in the morning, woke me up, demanded to be known, and demanded to be written. And I'll also tell you this is a news story. So I always ask people, when you're tending to a news story, we acknowledge it as being new life. It doesn't have the best clothes, its shoes aren't polished, it's just learning how to be here. So you're the first to catch this story. It begins like this. I'm reading a story. I don't normally read, but that's how new it is. You know how the story went. Earth was lonely. Her once upon a time of being in communion with all the humans had been long ago. They had forgotten how to listen to the wind, how to receive guidance from the flow of her waters, how to be nourished by her songs, how to play with her and dance with her. They had even stopped caressing the skin of her body, and they had even refused to dream with her. They say that Earth felt abandoned and used as more and more people devoted themselves to the gods of technology. And as if that wasn't bad enough, they started name calling her. When she got upset and cried her emotions into the hurricanes, they called her crazy and dangerous and out of control. And when she stopped flowing from the lack of connection and intimacy, they called her dry and worthless. And when the parts of her that went untouched became cold, they called her frigid. They say Venus came and did some straight talk with Earth about the nature of love, and that she was in an abusive codependent relationship with some self-serving narcissists, and that she was confronting some serious gaslighting, as they called her greedy when she wanted them to stop mining her gems without permission. And they called her mean and cruel and out of control when she put up boundaries and stopped allowing the whole take pattern. They even tried to tell her that change was a terrible thing. Now, Earth was terribly confused because before these times, humans had always danced with her and honored the seasons of change. But they had changed how they treated her when they stopped the flow of their giving. So why was it all of a sudden a bad thing when she was evolving and changing as they had always done? So the humans, they spoke to her and they said that they had a perfectly fine relationship and they loved her. They really did. And they told her that as they stared at photos of her that were taken from years ago from inside the cages of their homes. They say that Earth raged, burned like a woman scorned, until at last she gave way to grief. The loss of her relationship with so many she had loved, her tears flooded the earth. There are many stories about what happened next, and no one agrees upon her motivation. Some say Earth performed an act of tough love. So she kicked them off her and into the universe so they could get a sense of perspective, and after all, distance makes the heart grow fonder. Others say it was an act performed from a bitter and lonely being who was so desperate for companionship, she would do anything to shake them to their senses and break the spell of consumerism, fear, and greed that had taken over. And still others say it was just a simple and pure act of love, a last-ditch effort to bring them closer. But this much we know is true. A mysterious being visited Earth, and it went by the name of Corona. And as you know, there is not one story about where this mysterious being came from, but many. And this being had superpowers no one had seen before. And one of the first things it did was steal the first gift that humans were given by Earth: breath. This being was able to inhabit places without even being there. It inhabited houses without entering. By infiltrating the realm of technology where so many humans had lost themselves, it traveled through words and through stories, building itself a room inside the mind. No one had seen anything like it before. It fed on isolation, on separation, and it grew bigger and stronger as it feasted on fear. But it also did something no one else could. In the blink of an eye, it put a stop to the take habits of humans and reminded them of one of the most valuable gifts they had to give: their presence. It harnessed the more mentality and offered up simple pleasures of cooking and sharing. While at first it appeared to be forcing people apart and to be driving families with children crazy, it catapulted people into the streets as once who were finally alone with themselves could no longer sit still with the injustice that they had been running from. New dating apps formed, bringing together those who are most heavily impacted, single families and families with young children, with single people who are looking for companionship and connection. All of a sudden, we were creating stronger systems of community so many had been longing for. They say that the fear of not having enough gave birth to a surge in gardening, and at last, the earth had a way of communing with humans again. They say the birds were listened to and even watched. They say that Earth got to giggle in the next chapter of this part of the story, because the science that had declared, that same science that had declared that she was dangerous for her simple nature of change, that same science declared that she was now the only safe way and place to connect with others. That the safe way was by going outside the walls of their home and connecting in the presence of the bare and naked earth. The ocean took delight as more people than ever visited her shores, and the trees shivered in wonder as humans rested beneath her and climbed their limbs. And they say the lakes even laughed and danced and swayed with love from all the companionship. The flowers had never felt so seen. And they say that Earth, at the end of the day, was saying, you want to be together, You want to know what it feels like to be connected. You want to know what is real, what it feels like to have a shared reality. Come, she beckoned. Receive my present to you, which is your presence. Because as the world turns, outside your walls is the safest place to be. And that is your story for today. So thank you for playing with me today. Such a pleasure. And if you have any questions, thank you, Anna Marie, happy birthday, happy birthday. If you have any questions, then by all means, I'll stay on for a couple moments. And there you go.
Leah,
Yes.
can you hear me? It's Allison. Is it okay to ask a question?
Yes.
Thank you so much for that. First of all, that was beautiful. Thank you for sharing that story.
Oh, thank you.
Well, really, just a beautiful, beautiful framing.
Oh, thank you.
I had a question about, I know in your email about the masterclass, you mentioned the hero's journey and how different cultures other than Western culture have different perspectives on that. And I'm wondering if you could touch on that.
Sure. So what I want to say is I'm not the scholar in the hero's journey, but I can share what I know a little bit about it. So we'll talk about the structure of the hero and then the hero's journey. So I recently learned that, like, in the Eastern perspective in particular, like the hero, the structure, the archetypal structure of the hero, it's considered a dangerous story structure. They really are seen as like these narcissistic, self-serving, egos out of control archetypes, you know? So now you look at our society who idolizes the hero, and you understand, like, wow, what is and I'm gonna say patriarch, and I'm gonna be really careful about this because masculine and feminine lives in all beings, right? So when I talk about the patriarch, I'm not just talking about men, I'm talking about how it lives through all of us. But that patriarchal structure, when you talk about it, it's like, when you look at that design and what we see as acceptable in that hero design, we can also understand how oppressive that is, right? So when you look at the hero's journey, that story structure, more and more it's understood as being a very male-oriented structure, and one because you've got to go out into the world, right? So that's a masculine definitive approach, right? The feminine version might be to go inward, okay? In the masculine hero's journey version, you have to go find a monster outside of yourself that you can slay in order to understand your gifts and strengths and what you have to give to your village back home. It's one way of looking at it, because you always go out and then you come back. It's a circle. But look at that really carefully, and we could even look at we could play with our current world and put it into the mythic dimension and say, oh, okay, well, some people are demonizing a president right now. They're saying that's the bad guy. He's such a, depending on your political perspective. And again, I'm just playing in the realm of story. I'm not making any political things. I'm just saying this is something that's very popular in our world right now. Well, when we do that, it's like when you make something that bad guy, it's like, again, what if you flipped him into master teacher? Wow, that's a different way to live in the world. But when you look at that you're always going to have to find the bad guy outside of yourself to find your own gifts, then it's like there always has to be, you're in this world where there's always bad against good, and you don't get to live in a holistic, embodied sense of managing the balance of all things and all beings. Right, so you're always going to be stuck in the evil, the black against white, the evil against good. Why I can't think of the evil against. It's funny, but anyway, it's like that dichotomy. So if you go into a different kind of story structure, which we don't have a lot in the U.S., it's a different kind of way. So I was just reading a bunch of stories by Leslie Mormon Silko, and one of the books was called Storyteller, and it's all these stories from the Lakota tradition and from the Pueblos, I believe, in New Mexico. and the story structures are so different. They're so different, you know, and it just hurt my head every time because it has nothing to do with our story structure. And I began to feel how much, you know, my being has been shaped and formed by how we make stories and how we try to make meaning out of everything. You know, it's a dangerous thing when we try to make meaning out of everything, even though I just kind of played with it in that story, right? You know, it's like we have to take 3 steps back and say, I'm just playing here. So I just went on a nice little tangent, Allison. I hope that helped get you to something.
Yeah.
Yeah, okay.
I appreciate that. Yeah, I think you're speaking to the masculine perspective creates dualism. And
Yeah.
you're talking about structures that are more holistic.
Right, right. So what would it be if we lived in a story, or if we embraced a story where we could see all the parts of ourselves, or even what would it be if we went to go looking for the demons inside of ourselves or the monsters inside of ourselves? And then what if we see the wholeness in the monster? What if we see that monster not as something that has to be cast out or banished, but what if we see it as something that holds both a wisdom and a gift? And now we get to see the wholeness of ourselves rather than be afraid of ourselves. So, you know, classic examples, how many women have been told that they're out of control or that they're too much, you know, and some of that just might be that there hasn't been a world that makes space for them to live in the wholeness of what they are so that it can be channeled in a really productive way, you know. So I just heard out of control for the first time, you know. Oh, out of control, life force. It's just a life force out of control, you know, whatever control means. But, you know, I would say out of the channel. Can we just reframe that a little bit?
Thank you so much.
Any other random? Yes, Annette. Oh, I think you have to take yourself off mute. I can't hear you. I see your lips moving. Now you're off mute. No. Oh. Do you want to type your question in so at least we can get it? Yeah, sorry, I hate that. I know my audio just stopped working, so I have to call it on my cell phone. So you're hearing me on a cell phone and seeing my on my computer, so I can see all of you. Type in your question if you can. Anyone else have questions, inquiries?
Could I ask a quick question?
Yeah.
What was the Hawaiian quote? I looked back through the text and I couldn't see it.
Yeah. So the Hawaiians believe that words are so powerful that they can set the world into motion or slow it down.
Got it. Perfect. Thank you.
Sure. Okay. I'm waiting for Annette's question. So if anyone else has a question. Okay. Annette says, I'm new to all of this and I'm interested in the sanctuary course. I wonder what the prerequisite I need to bring. Nothing. You know, commitment, I would say. Just the commitment to show up, a willingness to play and be curious. It's like during these times, one of the gifts that COVID has brought to me is discernment. You know, and I realize that the groups that I'm in and the places that I choose to belong mean that much more to me. You know, and so what do you want to commit yourself during this time? And so that is like my ask for people, because it makes the place stronger. You know, it makes the work stronger. And I've been noticing that now more than ever, people who are showing up in classes are so committed and so much fun. What is happening in this place is just, I'm so fueled by it, you know. So I would say you don't have to have any writing experience or storytelling experience. It's not about that. Sanctuary, it's all about discovery and just discovering and just being willing to be present and play with what you explore. And then how much commitment is between each session, says Kariana. So for Sanctuary, you know, the invitation is to redesign a room. So it's, you know, and I suggest your bedroom because again, that's your dreaming space. So, you know, it's not designed to go fast. So you're not supposed to like go in there and get out of there in a week. So it's not like you have to do everything, but like you do really want to be like practical about thinking, what does it take to redesign a room? And what does it take to take everything out and put it into boxes, move it into the hallway, you know, and do what you do with it, because we're going to do stuff in that empty space before you refill it again. So again, it's not designed to be fast. So it would be, it's totally up to you and your space and how much time, but that gives you a little bit of a peek into what's going to happen. Mona's saying, asking, tell me if that answers your question, Kariana. How to get over the stress and death of loved ones in the time of COVID that you cannot even be with your loved ones. Yeah. Mona, I'm taking this in. So we can just all take a deep breath. You know, it's like, how do we, I don't think there is any getting over the death of a loved one. You know, I think that's much more about how do we be with the grief of it.
Yeah.
Yeah. Carolyn, do you have some wisdom that you're feeling called to speak?
Actually, the first thing that came from my intuition is the fact that we have this modern technology, and go into that place of the heart with your loved ones. What we have to remember is that we are beautiful spiritual broadcasting stations, and we can send our love and connect with the person over the telephone, over this system. You know, just by talking and hearing their voice, you can feel that energetic of love that you have for them and they have for you. So part of it is really realizing that we can connect, even if you can't be in the same room with that person. I have one of the members of my community who is very concerned about her mother who's living in a nursing home, and they really want to be with the mom. But what they've been able to do is to have that connection, really letting their mom know how much they love her and care for her. And it's sustaining the mom who used to have their physical presence more often than she has now. So at this point, they are arranging a 1-week visitation.
Thank you.
And it looks like that's going to work, but it's really having that heart connection. We can go to the place of the heart. I have a question for you, Leah,
Yes.
if you don't mind. I'm looking for a different story about freedom, about not having bondage. I don't want to tell the traditional American story. Do you happen to have one in your cache?
Yeah, God, what a great question. I so appreciate that. You know, here's what I would play with in this kind of situation, and it's my favorite way to play. When wanting to get to know something better and wanting to get to know it in a bigger way, sometimes I'll go to freedom itself, and and just listen for what's the story of freedom. Like, what is the story? Like, who's freedom's parents? So, what is the creation story of freedom itself? Who created freedom? Is freedom bisexual? You know, is freedom, you know, is freedom a certain color? Is freedom a rainbow? Like, you know, like you can just start playing with it. And this is where it's like, again, we're going in for that sacred story. So it's even, how can we even back up? I would even say I was doing too much thinking and say, how can I back up and just say, freedom, speak to me? You know, what is your story? Who do you love? Who do you like to hang out with? Who is it, like, who won't leave you alone? I one time told a story. I have this, it's one of my favorite stories. It's the love is the superpower. And love is a superhero. You know, one of love's superheroes is that it can never die. It can change form, but you know, and one of the scenes in the story is love walks into a bar. And every time love shows up at the party, you know, love's got its gangs of pals, you know, and it hangs out with love and ecstasy and joy and pleasure and romance and rage and jealousy and hate and codependency, you know, and like, look, if you invite love to the party, all of its friends are going to come too, you know. So just like any big community, you got to figure out who you want to hang out with and who you don't. If you're going to invite love, that's just the deal. So sort of like, how can we just like expand our imagination and our understanding by entering into that place of awe as we get to know, okay, what is freedom really? And what does freedom want to tell us? And Carolyn, I hope you write that story, and I hope you bring it to the Story Sanctuary on the website, on Facebook, and share it with us, because I'd love to hear what you discover.
I thank you, because I was really thinking I wanted a story that would capture everybody. I know we're celebrating Pride Month, but there's so many issues that we're dealing with now, until I know there's freedom in every corner for everybody. So thank you.
You're welcome. You're welcome. You're welcome. All right. We've spent such delicious amount of time together today. If there's anything else that is burning that wants to be said, great. Otherwise, I look forward to seeing you and reading with you. And Allison, always a pleasure to get to hear your voice. And have a good day. I'll take everyone off mute so we can say goodbye together. Bye.
Bye.
Have a lovely day.
Hi, Leah.
Bye.
Bye.
Thank you.
Good to see you. All right, take good care. Take good care. Check your spam boxes. Go on your adventure for the next email. Bye.
Thank you so much.
You're
Bye.
welcome.